Hey guys, I'm Felix here, and I think it's time we did a little PSA on Space Engineers' state of play, because quite recently, they have updated their system requirements, and I believe that the system requirements are way too high for what the game is. I should note that the recommended specifications in the past have been reasonably normal. You know, your minimum asking for the minimum that you can really support DirectX version 11 on. For Geforce 4 series or higher, ATI 5 series or higher, or an RX 2 series or higher. And these are just sort of the most bottom end machines that you can, graphics cards that you can have in order to run DX11, which the game required once planets were added, and obviously operating system Windows 7 or higher. This is all reasonably normal, and when you go into recommended requirements, again, it's reasonably normal for what you would expect. Recommended, it's what we recommend you play the game on to get sort of a mid to high range at a reasonable frame rate. If you've got better hardware, then you can play on far higher frame rates in ultra or all high. Recommended is you might need to do a bit of tweaking, but you can play the game at a reasonable frame rate. Minimum requirements aren't actually the most minimum specification of machine that will run the game. It's actually a little bit higher than that, but it's what they advise your minimum to be at the very least in order to run the game at a reasonable frame rate on the lowest settings. Though you might be able to squeeze out a little bit more if you can accept a slightly lower frame rate, basically. All of that is reasonably normal, and in 2015 they had even lower specifications when they didn't have planets and they could support DX9. Things have changed though dramatically, and this is the point where we start thinking, are they actually willing to do any more optimization? Because system requirements, and this is the minimum requirements, is now an Intel i5 at 3 GHz or higher, or AMD equivalent, 8 GB of RAM, Geforce 750 or an R9 270X or higher, and of course version 11 of DX. That's your minimum. Now your minimum basically reads like I would expect a recommended to read, because minimum you might put in an i3. An i3 should be perfectly good to run the game at its lowest settings. However, they've decided that no, it needs to be an i5. That's because in recommended they are recommending a quad-core i7 at 4.5 GHz. Now I did a little bit of research into this. Thankfully we have this wonderful tool called the Steam Hardware Survey. And the Steam Hardware Survey is a survey of everyone who uses Steam, who wants to contribute to the survey. And only about 6% of Steam users use a chip that's more than about 3.5 GHz. 3.7 I think it was. So you're looking at a very, very small amount of people who are using a quad-core i7 at 4.5 GHz or higher, or AMD equivalent, because they have to put that in. Just no words. And then memory 16 GB of RAM, and they advise that in order to play it on sort of what we recommend you play the game on, a 1070 GTX or an RX Vega 56. I was a bit puzzled about this, why they put in the RX Vega 56, because that card's been around for a while, or at least the stuff behind it's been around for a while. I don't really know why they didn't say like an R9 4 series and an R9 5 series, because it's just a bit baffling. But anyway, the PSA is basically this: the system requirements for Space Engineers has changed, and it has increased substantially from what it used to be. So if you bought all of those years ago where you thought, well, this game will run well on my system, there is a very good chance it will not run well on your system anymore. And the great thing about this recommended thing is that if you then go to Keen and say, well, I can't run this game on medium or high settings, they can look at your setup and say, well, you've only got a chip that goes at 3.2 GHz. You're under recommended specs, so you might just want to lower your settings a bit. that's laziness as far as I'm concerned. This is a company that have added planets, and they've realised that they cannot optimise their system anymore without severely changing how the game functions. They cannot simulate 6.6 AU of space at all times. They cannot render the planet. And they're probably not rendering the planet at all times, they're probably rendering a fair amount of the planet from the player's point of view. It's probably not done in a chunk-based system. We know it's not done in a chunk-based system as far as simulation is concerned. It's probably not rendering all of that. In fact, I'm fairly certain that you can do little tests to find out if things are being rendered or not. Basically by turning around really quickly. Sometimes things won't necessarily load in as fast as you can turn around. And that's fine. You know, it means that things aren't actually rendering when you aren't looking at them. But this is slightly concerning for all people who want to play Space Engineers. And have bought before they just changed the system requirements. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to end this video here. If you want to know what game is being played in the background, the game is called Fortress Craft Evolved. You can pick it up on Steam for, it's a fair price, I think. I can't remember exactly what it is at the moment. But there's an awful lot to do, and from what you should have seen on the video, because I haven't actually recorded that bit yet, that is actually quite an early base. There's an awful lot of other stuff to come. So with that, I will say thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.